Whenever we're going to talk sports law, of course, I have to bring on Law and Batting Orders Tony Iliakostas. Tony, we've had a lot of stuff happen since the last time you and I have chatted. On the Yahoo side, this is our first video session, but wanted to start out with one of the biggest parts, which is Ray Rice, NFL player who apparently decided that he was going to use his wife as a punching bag in an elevator. He got reinstated because, of course, we can't actually have anything go to fruition because in this country we do have double jeopardy. And in a way, he's almost made out to be the victim here because of the NFL's ineptitude. How was TMZ able to get some video before them? I don't even think they wanted to view it.
Pretty much. And the funny thing is the investigation, which was initiated by the NFL internally, is still going on. So we still have many results to come out. But what's very interesting about the whole Ray Rice situation was that many people had expected Ray Rice to win this appeal. And sure enough, he did. And at least I'm talking from the legal expert side of things. And for sure, I think he had a legitimate argument to make. It's not, his reinstatement is not to say that, well, he's a domestic violence abuser. He's someone who beat his wife. He should suffer the consequences. Yes, he should suffer consequences. But if the NFL punished him 2 games originally, that should have been the standing punishment. And now, by subsequently, as a result of a snafu on the NFL front office side of things, by subsequently suspending him indefinitely and then ultimately getting cut by the Ravens, for all those events to happen that way, of course, Ray Rice is going to come open and say, well, my employment was terminated improperly. I should have received the 2-game suspension, and that was that. And now, as after this appeal has now come forward and has been in his favor, he is looking for employment, but don't be surprised if we see a lawsuit against the Ravens for basically wrongful termination, where he can allege that the original suspension of 2 games should have been the only suspension that he should have suffered for this incident. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, you're right. It was your typical double jeopardy type of case. He came out clean, and aside from the fact that he made a very grave error, which, at least from the Today Show interviews with Matt Lauer, he seemed very apologetic. So his wife was very emotional, but seemed to forgive her husband repeatedly. It seems like he wants to carry on with his life, and he wants to play with an NFL team. And honestly, I think he will. We saw it with Mike Vick. Mike Vick, beat the living daylights out of dogs, had dog fighting rings every, corner around him, and he got caught for it. He served his time, and he went back in the NFL, and he played great. And it goes to show you that NFL players sometimes do deserve a second chance. And as long as he can still play the game, I don't think NFL teams will be dissuaded to have him on board. The question will be whether or not it'll be this season or whether or not he'll sit out the rest of this year, since the NFL season is coming down to an end. And maybe he'll start fresh next season, or he could always join a team if they're in the playoff push.
I'm still a little troubled by the NBC interview. I know that the Today Show likes to make everything a Harlequin novel, but when that comes into effect and you're talking about something so serious, and it makes it almost to the idea of, well, let's, move on from it. It still bothers me, as well as her response. Janay's response to me bothered me from the standpoint that now it's viewed as, well, it's going to be some message from God to be able to have us, work on domestic violence. No, you got hit by your husband, and it is a grave act, and I believe anything she wants to do on behalf of, ensuring that we're working, to better domestic violence is one thing. But don't make him act as if he's somehow done a good thing in this, and that's what bothers me most.
I agree with you, and I don't know if it was just something impulsive that she said at that point. Maybe it was something from a PR script. Let's be real. If in some way you can make a legitimate argument that some events could transform people's perceptions of things. And for sure, this incident definitely changed her perception of how domestic violence is seen in the United States. But I do have to say that it's more important to contend to make an argument, at least on national television, that aside from this incident happening to yourself, you were a victim of it, and she seemed to admit that she was gravely hurt by this, and she was there with her mother to her left, sobbing and saying how she felt violated and how she felt mortified and so dazed and confused when it all happened. So she seems to admit that she was a victim of domestic violence, but I think the core principle that she should have been illustrating is that this is happening to millions and millions of other women around the country. And it's up to us as loyal, noble citizens who are able to financially support domestic violence clinics or organizations to help those organizations so that they can assist women who are victims of domestic violence. I think that could be the best PR move in this instance, to bring awareness of organizations like Sanctuary for Families, which is here in New York, that helps victims of domestic violence, or to help the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or to help some domestic violence clinic out in California or Texas or Oregon or elsewhere. Ultimately, you have to sort of see the consequence, which in this case is domestic violence, name it, this is domestic violence, and push forward and make it your habit of saying this is something that we do need to address. We can't be in denial about it. And as long as we do our part to assist those victims of domestic violence, that at the end of the day is most important. I think, for her religious motivation to bring in saying, this was a message from God, if she deems it that way, fine. I think she had every right to think that. But I think collectively as viewers, as people who saw this incident, it's our duty, it's our obligation to really see the big picture, which is that if she was a victim of domestic violence, your next door neighbor could be a victim of domestic violence. Anyone could be a victim of domestic violence. And to raise that awareness, to raise the word of helping prevent that type of those types of incidents from happening, I think is most important.
But what I'm bringing up is the idea of like Casey Anthony deciding she's going to speak on behalf of infanticide. It's just not, that's the perpetrator. That's not the purpose that should be. Now, she can speak all she wants. I just have a problem with Ray Rice being a part of that. And, much to the same effect of Jeff Taylor, who just got reinstated from the Charlotte Hornets. He was suspended 25 games. Should he now speak to domestic violence? Maybe he can speak, hey, I was wrong and I was against it, but don't make him somehow the advocate as if, what he did is almost lessened. And that's my problem with it, is it almost becomes where it's a lesson of a crime because, well, now I'm an advocate for it. You don't get that chance with me.
Well, we saw it with Michael Vick. He was left and right doing all these ASPCA dog commercials or was, advocating, an end to dog fighting. So, we've seen it before. It has happened many, many times. It's like if we see the next time Lawrence Taylor on television talking about, don't do drugs, and he's on a commercial doing that, or we see someone else, some other athlete caught up in a crime doing something advocating for an end to the crime that they committed. It is weird. I think in Jeff Taylor's case, though, he may be a lesser known player, so I don't know if the hype with him will be as high. He'll be notoriously known for being one of the first NBA players to be suspended under Adam Silver for domestic violence. But maybe not now is the time for him to speak. Perhaps it would be better if he spoke later on. But I think in his case, if he wanted to, if he thought that he felt compelled to talk about it, but in a very honest, direct human way, if he felt compelled to say, I was wrong for what I did, that would be tolerable. I think to be a full-fledged advocate of ending domestic violence so soon after you committed the incident, I think looks a little fishy. It looks artificial in my eyes. I don't think there's this sense of, well, I really learned my lesson. It would be a little bit more meaningful if he sort of stood back, really let the consequences and, the ramifications of what ensued after that incident, he would have to let that marinate before he really decides, well, I'm going to go in front of a camera and say, we need to stop this. So I think his case is a little bit different, but that's sort of what I think.
I still think it comes down to video. Because they had the Ray Rice video, it made such a bigger impact. Notice nobody said Jeff Taylor should never play basketball again.
It's
People
true.
still say that about Ray Rice as if it's a big deal. But one of the aspects that really comes down to this is I wonder if sometimes this is actually going to have the reverse chilling effect on wives who don't want to report their husbands, because if they are in the NFL, NBA, they're going to lose their jobs, they're going to lose their livelihoods. And I'm not saying that the women are gold diggers. I'm saying more from the aspect of that's what they're paid to do. So once you lose that, it's not like there's another NFL gig around. I mean, there's not 10 NFL teams in a certain area. There's one NFL team in a certain area. It's just a big, deal to kind of understand exactly what this might have ramifications and impact to do.
I agree. In fact, I remember touching back on the Ray Rice interview, Janay was talking about how when Ray Rice was let go by the Ravens, it's almost like their life just stopped. They had made a life in Baltimore, and the possibility of them going elsewhere was something that they never really contemplated initially. Now that is a very real possibility. Ray Rice could be playing for the Denver Broncos. Ray Rice could very well be playing for the Seattle Seahawks or the Raiders or some other team. Those possibilities are very real for Ray Rice. And for women, I guess there is that intimidation factor of, well, he did hit me, but I don't really want him to lose his job because I'm going to be reporting this. It's almost like, I hate to use this legal term in this case, but it's almost like a cost-benefit analysis. So is it, in this case, if I can speak in layman terms, it's more like saying, what's a lesser evil? Is it a lesser evil to let my husband beat the living daylights out of me, but he keeps his job and he still is financially supporting us and making a life for us? Or is it better for me to let him lose his job if I report that he beat me and he loses his job, but at the end of the day, I'm doing some social good? And I think it's just a very personal decision that some women have to make. I would hope that they're logical enough to make that decision of, well, let me report this incident and let me see if we can sort of if I can make amends with my own husband, see if we can, cross a bridge over troubled water here and can sort of remedy this issue and raise social good about domestic violence. I would hope they would make that decision as opposed to being intimidated, because very commonly victims of domestic violence, the one reason why they don't report domestic violence incidents that they're victims of is because they are intimidated. They are scared to report. They're just, they feel, like a prisoner. They feel like no one's going to listen to them or think that they're, foolish for thinking something like that. But I mean, it's becoming a very real problem. And, one thing that's going very much hand in hand with domestic violence in this day and age is human trafficking. And I know having worked at Sanctuary for Families here in New York, that domestic violence, a lot of victims of domestic violence were victims also of human trafficking. And it's something that pairs so well. So, and look how now it's finally becoming something up there in the forefront. And we have, thankfully, acts like the Women of Violence Against Women Act. And, we have social awareness about these issues. So I think ultimately in the end, I hope that women won't feel intimidated about, what they endured from their husbands or spouse, and that they will come forward and be very willing and open to tell the truth. And ultimately the truth is the best thing for them.
But I think one of the things that comes into a special case for NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball that a lot of people don't understand. They'll say, well, these are millionaires. They can afford it. Antoine Walker, who is a former forward basketball player, played with the Celtics and a bunch of other teams. He had $110 million and he's now broke.
Yeah.
People do not understand, the layman, the general public. And look, I don't even know if I understand. He even had a financial advisor. So it wasn't like he wasn't told what to do.
Right.
But at the same time, when you're having that, you talk about the cost-benefit analysis, you're almost having a sliding scale where you could be a millionaire one day, and, Janay and Ray Rice may be broke right now.
Yeah,
which is inconceivable, because only a few months ago they could have been, rolling in it, because they're living in a luxurious lifestyle, paycheck to paycheck, living like Shaws, that they can't afford, and so it comes back to, will this actually become something more of a problem? If you have an athlete who decides to, engage in this type of stuff, you talk about, Michael Vick. Michael Vick was instantly broke. But Michael Vick, also went 2 years in prison. He had to basically renegotiate his entire salary structure. He's still paying off debt for the next 400 years based on the fact that, he made bad choices, but at least he had time before he actually got reinstated. I just think that with Ray Rice, it's like they instantly want somebody back and, instant karma. Not going to happen. It's
true. Yeah, I think his case is going to be very interesting in terms of like how his financial sort of forecast is going to be. I don't know how much he was making with the Ravens. I want to say he was making somewhere between $2 million and $4 million. And, I mean, to an ordinary person, I mean, that's fantastic. But for him, it's like probably chump change. And if he had a great season this year, I wouldn't be surprised if he could have gotten a real big extension and, could have been one of the highest paying running backs because he is very good and he has a Super Bowl ring under his belt. Although I think the one advantage with him is that he still is fairly young and he is not in a situation like Michael Vick. He's not going to be, hopefully not paying off that much debt, but he didn't serve any jail time. So I think his circumstance is a little better. It's just the question is, will someone sign him soon enough so that he won't be in dire financial straits like someone like Michael Vick? So it's something that has to be seen, but certainly the concern is very much out there.
Well, issues are something that athletes have taken on for years, but it's kind of been diminished in the last few years, especially as the brands of image of athletes have kind of permeated. We saw with the St. Louis Rams, the hands up, and then also Derrick Rose wearing a shirt saying, "I can't breathe." And a lot of this comes at an interesting time for us as a nation and, as just, people watching, because now the world of sports is kind of bringing this up. Magic Johnson had recently been critical of players for not being as socially active. He'd commended LeBron, but he said there's more to be done. I'm always kind of curious of whether or not, and I guess I'm more asking you as your generation, do you understand the lack of context that is actually going on when you talk about historically people actually speaking up? Muhammad Ali, everyone acts as if this was just a great thing that, every time he spoke up and he said, this and he said that, but they forget the fact that he also went to prison for it. That's what bothers me about the lack of context. Everyone thinks that somehow, Derrick Rose can't lose his job or be suspended or everything else because he has the freedom to say what he wants. But is that really something that, is kind of permeated, or is that something, with your generation that you guys got to understand there are consequences even by being right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think in the sports world, it's almost like if you say the wrong thing, you could be punished for it. But if you do say the right thing, you still could be punished for it. So it's almost like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, really, if you think of it that way. It's very unfortunate what has happened the past few weeks between Ferguson and the indictment that didn't happen with Darren Wilson. He was not charged for killing Mike Brown, and also what happened with Eric Garner. I can definitely speak to the whole Eric Garner situation here in New York. I mean, the protests left and right here have been incredible, and I'll speak quite frankly. What differentiates the Ferguson case from the Eric Garner case is that with the Eric Garner case, you have indisputable video.
You have video. Once again,
it goes back to the video. It goes back to the video. But you have video that clearly shows Officer Pantaleo with his arm around Eric Garner's neck, putting him in a chokehold, versus the Ferguson case where, supposedly there's the claim that Mike Brown had his hands up, but then there are conflicting stories that originally it was Mike Brown charging at Officer Wilson, Darren Wilson. So, I don't want to sort of opine on that one because it is 50-50. There are conflicting arguments there, and that's sort of, I think, what made that case a little more complicated. But you do have something like the Eric Garner case, which really was something you couldn't really fabricate. It was right there visible for everybody to see. So now with that in mind, now with the result that Officer Pantaleo is not going to be indicted, I think for athletes to, some of these athletes are my age, if you want to put it that way, or just a little older than me, or, somewhere around my age bracket. And I think part of the reason why they feel so motivated to be so public and open about why they don't agree with the decision or why they feel the need to sort of be open about some social awareness or to tell the public about how they feel about these issues. I think the main motivation is because they feel like they have to be the leader to step in. I feel that a lot of people do not trust the justice system, but the fact that a lot of people turn to sports as sort of like a remedy, as sort of like a healing power. If an athlete comes forward and says, I don't support a decision, some people will say, wow, my favorite athlete just said he didn't support this decision. This makes me feel good. It's almost like after 9/11, everybody looked to baseball, the Mets and the Yankees, as sort of like that healing power, and they saw a city united. And in that way, you saw, a lot of these athletes coming forward and saying they didn't agree with the Ferguson decision, or they didn't agree with the Eric Garner decision, and they felt that for them as athletes, it was their duty to come forward and to say what they meant. That they felt that it was wrong for them, wrong for the justice system to exonerate these men. But as is the case with a lot of leagues, if you're too vocal about something, or if you're going to stir up controversy, you could get punished for that, or there could be the court of public opinion is open for business. And we saw with the hands up situation with the St. Louis Rams players, we saw the St. Louis County Police Department instantaneously say, well, we didn't condone this, we didn't support this at all. And I'm sure that there are NYPD officers not liking Derrick Rose wearing "I Can't Breathe." But at the same time, Derrick Rose isn't the only one saying "I can't breathe." You have hundreds of thousands of people walking through Grand Central Station or down the West Side Highway or through Times Square yelling "I can't breathe" and doing die-ins right in the middle of the street. So I think now looping back to how my generation would interpret that, I mean, at least for me, I like it. I think it's nice for athletes to be so public about it. I mean, it's good for them to see that they're not callous to these news, and it's nice for me to see that they are just as disappointed or disturbed that something like these atrocities like this are happening left and right. I mean, loss of life occurred, and at the end of the day, if they can be open about it, I mean, it's fine with me. But it's something. I mean, you're sort of getting on pretty thin territory there. If you sort of push the league's buttons too much, you could get in trouble for that. So, but needless to say, I think it's nice. Yeah, I think it's kind of nice to see these athletes being quite vocal about it.
This was something that actually came up on WFAN. Mike Fratello was talking to some, about Ferguson and all that, and Eric Garner, and some guy called in and used that crock argument. And this is something I think is interesting: is what do I tell my kids? As if everything's supposed to be an entertainment product. And I wonder if maybe some of this is really, unfortunately, Michael Jordan's lap, because Jordan's the first guy that said, well, Republicans buy shoes too. He didn't want to speak up on certain things. And if maybe that's where we have gotten to this type of area to where we don't expect our athletes to speak up. I talked about Muhammad Ali and all that stuff. People forget. Like I said, went to jail, lost his title, lost a lot of stuff, had people trying to find things on him for several years after. He was a commie. He was a horrible person simply because he said, I have no issue with the Viet Cong. Right. To me, that's where we've seen the athlete kind of transcend and change into a brand. And I wonder if maybe this is actually breaking apart that brand in a good way, that not a corporate sponsorship, but instead you're an actual person that has to live here, and maybe I respect you a little more, and I don't see you just as a millionaire.
Exactly. They're not being sort of like this robotic person. I mean, I'm going to touch on a similar issue that happened last season in the NBA. Look at what happened with Donald Sterling. Donald Sterling had the whole racist rant out there, TMZ again, with their videotape or in this case, audio tape, a possession of this, and it came out in the public, and everybody was horrified by this. And lo and behold, when that happened, you saw the whole Clippers team band together, not reversing their T-shirts, not wearing the Clippers gear. You even saw the day that Donald Sterling was ousted, you saw the Clippers website change from the ordinary red and blue website to black, all is one. I think that was their logo or something, or we are one. And, you saw leaders like Blake Griffin or Chris Paul talking about this. And what was nice about that is that they weren't advocating for Kia, or they weren't talking about assists with State Farm. They were being genuine people. And it speaks to how, they're not being artificial. They're not being these fake people who read off a script. They're not saying, well, I play good, and as a result of that, I got to read a script about how Gatorade is the best energy drink to drink out there because it gives you the most electrolytes, more than Powerade and vitamin water. They're not doing that. They're talking about a social issue because it's not just our America, it's their America too. It's their life as well. They have to live this daily, even beyond the NBA life. They're going to retire one day, and they're going to still endure issues like, black on white crime or white on black crime or just crime in general. And you're going to see all these issues come left and right. You're going to see racism. You're going to see, corruption left and right. They're still going to be a part of this society of disarray. And if they can be vocal about it now and inspire kids and, make them even more, well-founded role models for them, great, all the power to them. It's good. I think it's a great thing because at that point they sort of break out of that corporate mold and they are legitimate people. And I hope there are more athletes like that in the future. I hope that they will be more vocal about things like this, like Ferguson or Garner. And it's not about whether they're right or wrong. It's just the fact that they're vocal about it, that they're talking about it, that they're not ignoring it. That has to be beyond belief very much commended. And, I tip my hat off to them.
I think that, the Schilling case proves something to the players as well, that they actually own and run the league. As much as the owners may be there, the players are the ones that without the players, there's nothing. I do think LeBron had before done the hoodies with Travon Martin, had done other things. And maybe that transcends where his career has been going, because before he was always looked at as the villain. But maybe for, a few instances, he actually becomes somebody who, gives us some perspective collectively that some of this stuff is really beyond sports, but it should be addressed. I still think I would rather have, I know that some people just want the marionette doll that, talks every once in a while, but I would rather have my athletes that speak and, speak poignantly, even if they say things that I don't agree with. But I do think there is the problem, though, that we have, that, and I come back to lack of context, and it came up with Torrey Hunter. And this was that back in the 90s, he said something that he, didn't agree with gay marriage. And I know that, some of those attitudes have changed. And of course now, they want to bring it up now. And whether or not that's relevant, he was there to, have a signing, etc. I don't know if necessarily I can abuse somebody for past comments or whatever, but it seems that everyone feels that the perfect remedy is to have that person lose their job. Schilling has to lose their team. And my question is, doesn't that just make it worse? Don't they just, in a sense, burrow down, double down, and become more of a bigot rather than saying, look, what you're saying is absolutely hurtful, and hopefully trying to educate them through that? I mean, this isolation type of mentality only makes it worse, in my opinion.
I think to a certain extent, it's like it creates a damning image. It's at the end of the day, it's like, well, if someone, I'm going to touch on the Ferguson case because I think it's the perfect case of someone. I think it's the appropriate case to say that there are potentially two sides to it. There's the side that Mike Brown legitimately had his hands up, but then there's the other argument that he was trying to attack Darren Wilson. So, I think it's nice to use that example. Let's say that you had a white guy, a white football player say, well, I think Darren Wilson was right. I think he seemed very honest in the interview with George Stephanopoulos. And you know what? I believe him. I think that he was a victim of Mike Brown's violence and he was a threat. He was threatened by Mike Brown. And as a result of that, he had every right and was justified in shooting him. Now, if he said that, everybody's going to be up in arms for sure. It's going to be the headline on every sports website. He's going to be chastised. He's going to be criticized. Everybody's going to hate the living daylights out of him. But if someone said, well, Mike Brown was innocent because he was just a kid, 18 years old, didn't have a gun, everybody will praise him, that player, for being honest about it. I mean, it's an opinion, right? Everybody has an opinion somehow. The topics within those opinions are obviously, are up for debate. But I mean, it's like if someone has an opinion about, whether or not they don't like, some policy in the NBA or the NFL, what's to say that they can't object to it or support it? I think that's the beauty of free speech in this day and age, that there are always two sides to a coin. You can always support one side or the other side. I mean, that's what politics are about, right? You have Republicans and Democrats. You have peanut butter and jelly. I mean, there are always two sides to things, and I think to to be quick to, let's say, chastise an athlete for just having just one opinion that may not be the popular opinion, yes, you can call it bigotry for sure, but it is his opinion, and it may be hard to dissuade that player from having that opinion. I mean, you can always coach the player to always change his perception. You could always tell Tory Hunter, well, I think in this day and age we sort of embrace gay marriage, so if you could change your opinion, that would be great. I mean, it's a toss-up. I don't know if I think it would be sort of killing the essence of people having their own opinion about things. I don't think everybody will agree about the Ferguson decision. I don't think everybody will agree about gay marriage. I don't think everybody will even agree about the domestic violence policy and punishments within it, or even just a rudimentary rule that's laid into the NFL or another league or whatever. I think that's just the nature of how life has worked. There have always been contending sides. And if you try to kill that essence, then we wouldn't have something like the legal system where there are always two sides of things. You wouldn't have politics where there are always two sides of things. You wouldn't even have marriage because a husband's always going to have one opinion and a wife is always going to have one opinion. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's like my idea of it's an interesting dichotomy. It's almost like something that you need to have. It's otherwise society can't function well. So.
But I guess I would say, why would you want Tory Hunter to merely change his opinion to suit yours? Isn't that the whole idea, that you have differing opinions?
Exactly.
Milton Bradley doesn't believe in, A, the moon landing, or B, dinosaurs. Doesn't necessarily make him correct. And, you saw the issue with Curt Schilling, which was so bizarre,
right,
where ESPN... he puts out some erroneous stuff about fossils not existing and everything. He's actually called on the carpet by Keith Law, who's very respectful on it, doesn't say anything, too wild. And
just shows
Keith
an article.
Law is suspended for it. But what I found interesting was ESPN suddenly backtracked and goes, well, he wasn't suspended for that. What was he suspended for? And
right,
in a sense, do we have now people that'd rather defend the brand or the brand of the cult of personality rather than the actual... I mean, Keith Law was merely mentioning science.
Yeah.
Science
it was his
wrong?
opinion.
Yeah, but is science wrong basically because, an ESPN authority wants to say it? And if so, doesn't that mean that Bill Simmons really can say what he wants?
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting. It's almost like... it's almost like the media is trying to be a KGB type of thing. It's like you only have one opinion and that's it. Boom, you have to side it with us or you get chopped. I mean, it's stupid. It really is. You can have Curt Schilling say, "I believe in creation," and you can have Keith Law saying that he believes in evolution. Okay, that's fine. Leave it that way. It's good. It's good for us to see those contending arguments. I don't think it's fair to chastise one person over the other for having an opinion. Now, the debate between that is up to them. They can debate it all they want. It's up to them. But, why infringe on their ability to freely speak about something? I mean, the obvious thing that comes to mind is, well, if it didn't go sit well with the front office people in ESPN, then that's why they decided to suspend Keith Law. But they could have done the same thing with Curt Schilling. If they didn't agree with his creationist beliefs, then they very well could have done the same exact thing with Curt Schilling. All that to say, though, I think it's wrong for us to sort of diffuse what others believe. I think it's nice to have those varying opinions. You may not agree with them, but it's okay. That's, again, like I said, it's the essence of life. We always will have varying opinions on things. We will always think one thing and someone else will think another thing. It's just the way society works. And to sort of restrict people from having those opinions, I mean, I don't know. It doesn't sit comfortably with me. I think you're being more totalitarian doing that than, sort of inviting free open forum for people to have their own opinions.
But I think ESPN collectively eats its young. Let's talk about one of the issues that came up. So earlier this year, Todd Gurley got in trouble for possibly signing autographs and being paid for it. What's funny about this is ESPN columnists all over the place think that athletes should be paid. But because it's still a rule, man, they were really going to carpet. They made sure, they investigated fully. And then after that was all done, what did they end up doing? Now they're going after the autograph dealer who gave them the information to begin with. Their original source, now they're turning on him so that they can get more stuff up, because he was more upset. And the reason he reported it to the media and tried to sell it to begin with was that he was upset Gurley was signing too many autographs, thus the value of that $400 for those autographs wouldn't be there. This seems like it's just perpetually cannibalism.
It is. I mean, I think it's kind of sad that, it seems like writers are being like politicians, flip-flopping left and right. They're not taking a solid stance on, an opinion that they have, or, whatever. First it's, like you said, support Todd Gurley because, the student athlete is being damned by the NCAA system. They're being a prisoner. They're all indentured servitude. They should be paid, Then it becomes, should have abided by the rules. And then, it's almost like, are you trying to chastise a kid for getting an autograph, or are you trying to badmouth the NCAA for having this very antiquated rule when you know fully well that the NCAA is this big monopoly generating millions upon millions and millions of dollars with the college football playoff series and then some? I mean, it's just, I think at the end of the day, for Todd Gurley to unfortunately have to play this ping pong game of, whose fault is it? It's kind of unfortunate because now you get back to square one in the whole NCAA argument, the whole pay for play debate, which I know obviously a lot of people seem to have a very strong opinion about it. Student athletes should be paid. And you also have other people saying, well, student athletes should not be paid because it's an NCAA rule that they shouldn't be paid. But the flip-flopping back and forth, and to subject Todd Gurley to it, I mean, why? You're not doing any good for him, and you're not doing any good in your argument. And I think as and I'm speaking, having experience in the media industry, I think it's kind of sad that, from a reputation perspective, you may be destroying your credibility if you have that flip-flop mentality, sort of first supporting Todd Gurley and then sort of throwing him under the bus and then bringing in the autograph dealer and sort of bringing him in the mess and, the whole hoopla associated with that. So I think ultimately in the end, I don't know where a journalist will stand. I hope that they will still view what they originally saw, which is that, yes, Todd Gurley violated the rules, but it still speaks to the underlying issue that we have with the NCAA, which is that it is a cartel. It is making millions of dollars every single day, and they will unfortunately continue doing that until the day comes when the NCAA just is completely eradicated, as these super conferences go on their very own merry way, and hopefully the day will come when a starting quarterback for a college team will have a paycheck in the mail so that he can help feed his family.
I guess the only thing is, knowing the NCAA, what you're forgetting is the NCAA is a bunch of its member schools. So
sure, yeah.
If you want to break that apart, that's fine. But, speaking that wise, so what are you going to play a volleyball player?
Oh, that's up for debate.
No, that shouldn't be up for debate. Equalization. Why is a volleyball player's time less than a football player? I don't care how many people they bring forward.
Sure.
This is the kind of nonsense. Everyone wants to cite football and basketball, but they forget that there's a lot of, female
swimming
teams. Oh, yep. Tons of lacrosse, whatever. And the thing, I just think that that's kind of a murky world. I know that, in terms of eligibility, the LA law or the Georgia lawmakers are actually looking to, really make that a criminal act if you harm somebody's eligibility. I think that's a question mark in itself. I could harm somebody's eligibility by not knowing it. But I think that kind of not understanding the justice system or understanding the NCAA's justice system and whether that works out or not. I guess I would kind of close by asking your opinion on a few things. We've started to see, now people with the college football playoffs start to hire publicists and to start to hire lawyers to look through, all the little bylaws and everything. Did this just mean that we just wanted to spend more money on minutia?
I guess it speaks more and more to how the NCAA, which is supposed to be this amateur organization where they're promoting, student athletes playing a natural sport with their own God-given ability. It just speaks more and more to how it's becoming beyond corporate. It's like it's becoming an enterprise. It's industrialized, if I can call it that. To sort of bring in these experts, to bring in these people to sort of cross the I's and dot the I's and cross the T's, I think is speaking more and more to how the league, these conferences, whether it's the SEC or ACC or whoever, they're becoming far more commercialized, and it's really becoming more about the money as opposed to protecting the identity of the player or promoting the overall definition of amateurism. The NCAA always goes back to that definition. Well, we're trying to promote amateurism in our sport. Well, how are you going to do that if you're making millions of dollars now with 4 incredible teams entering the college football playoffs? I mean, you've got Oregon and Alabama in the top 2 already. I mean, those 2 schools generate millions of dollars. You have corporate sponsors behind those, behind them in those stadiums. I mean, it's just, it's. I don't want to use the word sickening, but I feel inclined to use the word sickening. It's kind of sickening and sad, but I mean, again, it just speaks to how the NCAA is just a cartel, and unfortunately, the NCAA student athletes will have to be a victim of this, unfortunately, until the day comes when hopefully they can, break into the league and, play a major sport and carry on their merry way.
Once again, fantastic stuff with Tony Iliakostas right here. Thank you very much, Tony. You have your own podcast, Law and Batting Order, and hope to hear some great things come out of that. And thank you for coming on.
Thanks, Troy. I appreciate it.